Which Premier League teams are in danger of being dragged into a relegation battle? And which are most likely to climb to safety? Well, to get into it on today's show, brought to you by Boyle Sports, we've got John Mackenzie. We've also got Alex Barker. The thing is, John, I wanted to start with Wolves, but I kind of think it's a little bit pointless. Just 2 points in 16 Premier League games, 0 wins, 14 losses. Probably the better question really is this the worst Premier League team ever?
The current worst Premier League team ever in terms of points totals is the Derby County team of 2007-08. I've got the points here on the board. You can see them here ending with 11 points.
Right.
So Wolves, this is them so far, 16 games in, and as you can see, they've got 2 points. So already a long way behind where Derby were in that season, although they did have a much better start to the season in the end. What I've done to just give you a sense of how much or little perhaps work they have to do, I've thrown a few projection lines in for what they can achieve. So this little orange one here, dashed one, is current trajectory. So currently on course to get 4.75 points at their current rate,
Shocking.
Which is not great, and we'll definitely see them going down. I suspect they probably won't hit that target because you can make the argument they've been actually a little bit unlucky if you look at some of the underlying numbers. Not enough, I think, to be out of the relegation zone, but certainly enough to be disappointed that they may be the worst Premier League team of all time. The other two lines I've got here is just one that goes up to 12 points. So what do they need to do to avoid being the worst team of all time? And that's 0.45 points per game. So we're talking a draw every other game or a win every 6 games. So very eminently doable.
That's very optimistic.
Well, a draw maybe it is. The other thing I've done though, just to give you a bit more of a sense of comparison, is I've taken the Ipswich team from last season. They went down in 19th place because, as you remember, Southampton got 12 points.
I thought it might be Southampton,
Yeah, Ipswich were comfortably relegated last season, and their points per game total, if Wolves were to take it from here on in, that would get them up to nearly 15 points. So even if they play as a really bog standard relegation team over the rest of their season, Wolves should avoid that 11 points total.
Okay, well, let's talk about Burnley then. Currently in 19th. Is a 6-point gap too big for them?
Well, we spoke about them quite positively on the show earlier this season, didn't we? And back then I was quite praising of Burnley, saying they're a hard-working team. Jadon Anthony had been doing very well. At the time, though, their underlying numbers were not good. In fact, they were like this, as they are now. They were bottom of the league for non-penalty expected goals conceded. But at that time, it seemed like it hadn't bothered them. They'd recorded back-to-back wins before we recorded. But as John said, Wolves have maybe been a bit unlucky. Perhaps Burnley have been a bit lucky to that point, because since then, the underlying numbers have caught them. They've lost 7 games in a row, and they've conceded 3 goals to Brentford, 3 goals to Fulham, 3 goals to West Ham as well. It is very ominous. So I'm also willing to throw them in the bucket with Wolves as going down.
Oh man, damning. We have to talk about Nottingham Forest, John, because I think obviously they started a bit dodgy. Now Sean Dyche is there at the helm charging away. They should have just enough, right?
Yeah, and for me, it comes down to that man, Sean Dyche. I think he's a fantastic manager. So I've got this. I love this quote. This has got to be one of the best football quotes from a press
Another one of your
ever.
quotes. Let's go.
So this is Dyche. I've been put in many boxes. I'm not bothered. 5 years ago, people were going, "Why do you rely on set pieces?" Now they're in vogue. Skinny jeans, flared jeans. Skinny jeans, flared jeans. His point here is that football tactics go in and out of fashion, and all he does is he continues playing the way that he does, and sometimes it does better and sometimes it does worse. I think he's actually really downplaying his ability as a modern coach, and I argued as much in our Did You Notice video this week. I made the argument that actually there's certain things you can see Sean Dyche doing, in this instance out of possession, which shows that he is actually a top-level coach. So we've got Forest out of possession. They're going to try and press up against Spurs, and we can see here that the way that the Forest back line is set up is basically man-to-man on the fullbacks and the wingers, and then you've got double coverage on the centre forward. Now, we've got Elliot Anderson here covering Xavi Simons, the Spurs 10. But what Elliot Anderson realises is that if they cover in this way, they've got a player advantage, and that means they have a player disadvantage further up the pitch. That's going to make it harder for them to press the Spurs build-up. So you can see him here just pointing to Xavi Simons to show Murillo to step up and cover him, because if that happens, then we can see Elliot Anderson can get forward. You've now got more players in the press, and Murillo is now covering Simons. In certain areas of the pitch, Elliot Anderson will be deeper when you want to have that extra coverage. But in this high press moment, you want to get more players forward. If we contrast that with Spurs, we can see that in the same situation, so fullback on the winger, and then we've got the double coverage of the centre forward, we've got Bentancur tracking Morgan Gibbs-White, the number 10. And what this means then is that there's fewer players for Spurs in that higher press, which means that it's easier for Forest to possess the ball. And as a result, we see that the game sort of going very much in Forest's direction. They create most of the chances. And in fact, the first goal that they score comes from a high press. So for me, Sean Dyche is the difference at the bottom of the table. I think Forest will be fine.
Yeah, a recent fashion magazine actually asked if Sean Dyche is the most fashionable manager in the Premier League. Got a penchant for Tom Ford suits, much like yourself, John. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Brentford because, look, they've surprised a few of us this season so far. Big wins against Liverpool, also Manchester United, but they're still in that kind of zone where I'm a little bit worried about what the future holds for them this season. What do you think, Alex?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. They've recorded some big wins on TV games, which gives a good impression. Right, they took points off Chelsea, took points off Manchester United, but they're still quite uncomfortably close to the relegation zone. And what's uncomfortable for me is that the thing that's saving them at the moment is their attack. They've scored 22 goals in the league. I think they've conceded 25. That's got them on the trajectory to just stay up, but I don't think it takes much to throw it off. So I've got Brentford's squad depth from the start of the season on screen. Let's focus on the number 10 position first. Let's not waste any time. Both of these players are ruled out for the entire season.
Oh, right.
So there's only one number 10. Let's look at the wingers. We've got Kevin Schade and Dango Ouattara. Ouattara's going off to AFCON, and that leaves Gustavo Nunes, who's a player you've probably never heard of, and Reece Nelson, who's played under 45 minutes of Premier League football.
At all, has he? Yeah.
Nunes hasn't even made a start. So we effectively have, even with Ouattara in, two wingers that Keith Andrews actually trusts to play. And then up front, we've got Igor Thiago, great striker, had a great Premier League season. Brentford's only recognised striker. So if he is injured, they're in massive trouble. And that's not the only thing that worries me here. It's not just their depth, it's the other ways that Brentford get goals. One of them has been long throw-ins. I think it's 3 long throw goals this season, which makes up their set-piece record. That has worked, but I think due to the prevalence of long throw goals in the Premier League this season, teams are starting to clock on how to defend it. So I've got an example of how Arsenal defended against Brentford recently. Arsenal employ a method here which Thomas Gronmark, do you know the throwing coach who worked with Liverpool before? He terms it the flexible sandwich, which is a fun term. Basically, what it means is giving the players a license to leave their player, or the player they're marking, to make sure other Brentford players have 2 players, one behind, one in front. So the ball's been thrown in here. It's going to go to this area where Igor Thiago is. You see 2 Arsenal players, one behind, Hincapié as well, trying to get in front. The ball comes in, and as it does, Hincapié is the one to head it away, but even if he misses it, there's an Arsenal player behind to apply pressure as well. It seems simple, but Brentford had 5 long throws in this game. Only one time did they even flick the ball on. So it's clearly working. And, there's still danger you can cause with a long throw, but I think if more teams clock on how to defend these, then that's another source of Brentford's goals that could go into decline. So yeah, Brentford probably going to stay up, but it doesn't take much to really throw them off course this season.
Yeah, and also Thiago, he scores goals, but a lot of penalties, so they need to foul him in the box, or at least win some penalties for them to actually make their striker work really well. So yeah, really good point there. Okay, as we're talking about Brentford, let's talk about their nearest neighbours. Let's talk about Fulham, because, well, they started the season not so well, but seem to have turned a corner. Here's Sam Tighe to tell us why.
Welcome to What's Changed, presented by Boyle Sports. Fulham have turned their season around. There's one man at the heart of it all, and it's not free-scoring Harry Wilson. In mid-November, Fulham were just 1 point above the relegation zone, but now they're 7 clear, having won 3 of their last 5 league games, and they scored 4 times against Manchester City. The key change has come in central midfield. Marco Silva started the season with a midfield pairing of Sasha Lukic and Sander Berge, but it proved too safe. It struggled to progress the ball. So, after 9 games, Alex Iwobi dropped deeper into Lukic's role, and that sparked huge improvement. Iwobi has played more progressive passes in the last 5 league games than Lukic did in the first 9. He's also able to join the attack and combine, meaning Fulham have more juice in the final third. And moving him deep has opened up a spot in the team for Samuel Chukwueze. His direct dribbling has caused big problems. He's racked up 2 goals and 3 assists in the last 5 league games. But there's a big problem. Iwobi and Chukwueze, along with defender Calvin Bassey, have gone to the Africa Cup of Nations with Nigeria, meaning Silva will have to go back to the drawing board to find a new solution to keep this run going.
Well, it looks like they've got better, but they're going to be some absentees due to AFCON, so let's see how it all works out. Right, let's now go to both Leeds and West Ham. Who's staying up? and who's going out of those two? I have a feeling you might say Leeds, but maybe that's just me prophesising.
Accusing me of bias.
I could just read your mind, man. I can see you smiling with glee.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Leeds.
What do you reckon?
Who saw that coming? I'm going to go West Ham.
Really?
Yes.
Why is that?
Maybe it's also due to bias, as I come from Romford, which is a West Ham stronghold, but I do not support them. I was bullied by West Ham fans. So I just think they're going to stay up.
What do you think Leeds are actually going to stay up? Real talk. I mean, Daniel Farke's tactics and all that kind of have been brought into question over time.
Yeah, well, the reason why I think Leeds are going to stay up is because I think they've built a squad to stay up. They spent most of the last year working on the problem of how do you survive in the Premier League, and the answers they came up with are lean into physicality, lean into the defensive side of the game, lean into those marginal gains you can get through set pieces. And as a result, you could see it in their transfer window. They signed 10 players. I think 6 of those players were over 6'1". So we're talking guys who are physically imposing, and it shows up on their starting 11. So this is roughly how they started the season out. Now that is a very physically imposing midfield. The question is, if you're going to play in this way with these sort of physically imposing players, how are you going to achieve ball progression? These guys are, I would say, pretty good at progressing the ball, particularly when it comes to carrying the ball. But in today's Premier League, you're not often going to have the situation where you're going to receive the ball back to goal, turn and run into that space. So you have to find ways of accessing that space. Now, fortunately for Leeds, they do have 2 very good technical passing profiles in Goodmanson and Jayden Bogle. What we saw at the beginning of the season was that with Daniel Farke wanting to try and build up from the back, it means that you have to rely on these 2 players, and you end up in sort of interesting situations where not only are you dropping your midfielders in to sort of help build the ball through these areas, you're then keeping your fullbacks a little bit lower to start with. You're trying to work the ball to them, and then when you get into these situations, they're trying to do these quick 1-2 passes where they can move the ball quickly down the field. The issue is that if this comes off, then yes, okay, maybe you'll have a striker in the box to aim at, and both Bogle and Goodmanson really good at, like, Goodmanson finding cutbacks, Bogle with these half-space crosses. But because they're having to play quite quickly, because the midfield are dropping in, you don't end up with a huge amount of options in the box. If you're trying to build up from the back and it doesn't work out, the obvious thing to do is to go long. Now, if you're going long to Calvert-Lewin, you've got Okafor and James in the wide areas, your midfielders deep, you're not giving yourself really good coverage and nice access to win second balls. So I would say this was quite a risky way of playing for Leeds, and I think the frustration for Leeds fans was that this squad had been built for, I guess, a bit more of a direct central, like, win second balls. We've got an incredible squad to be able to play this direct way, and it wasn't being done. Now, if we look at the results, you get to the Man City game and things are starting to look bad. But midway through that game, Daniel Farke changes things up, goes to this 5-3-2 formation that they've been playing recently, and they start going much more direct. And so at a point where he was given a bit of an ultimatum that if he didn't pick up points against Chelsea and Liverpool, he then stuck with this 5-3-2, got the win against Chelsea quite comfortably in the end, managed to pull off a draw against Liverpool, and then there was a draw against Brentford, still playing the same way. So let's just talk about why the 5-3-2 works. They're not trying to build up in the wide areas quite so much, or in the same way. So let's say we get rid of Dan James, bring in Okafor more central, or you can use Lucas Nemecha as well. These guys are going to be, I mean, especially these 2, good target men, so you can go direct from the goalkeeper. And Okafor is quite useful as well with Nemecha being injured. He can again, he can play with back to goal, but he can also make those runs in behind Calvert-Lewin. But now what we have is a situation where, because they aren't trying to build in the wide areas, we can push the fullbacks a little bit higher. And so what you're doing then is you're automatically getting your technical players, your creative players closer to goal from the off. And then you can structure your midfield to win second balls. So that when you're going long into these scenarios, Calvert-Lewin, just an incredible back to goal striker, an incredible target man striker. Often he'll be able to win the header, either knock it down to one of his teammates or as we've said, hold it up, play Okafor in. It's just getting the profiles of players that Leeds have in much better situations. Your midfielders are now winning second balls, which is what this midfield is built for. You're getting Bogle and Goodmanson more repeatedly into, I think, those wider areas with more players in the box when they do get it. And you've got the physicality in the back line to be able to play in these wide open spaces. Again, we've got Jaka Biol, we're not even talked about yet, Sebastian Bornau from the Bundesliga as well. So plenty of like box defending options, so they can sit deep, defend the box when the opponent has the ball, but in the moments when they do have the ball, they can get forward quickly, they can create chaos, and they're really nicely set up to make the most of those chaotic scenarios. So I think on the basis of this, Leeds are now playing the way that the squad was built to be played, and if they continue doing that for the rest of the season, I think they'll have enough to stay up.
Okay, Alex, can you just offer us a little bit of balance on this one?
So the issue I have with this back five is the flexibility of the defenders in particular isn't very high. So Farke doesn't really allow much flexibility from the wing backs, I've noticed. He allows the centre backs to step up a bit between the lines to track players, but this back five is largely quite flat, which means there's a lot of pressure on this front unit to not only apply pressure on the opposition up here, but also get across the pitch as the ball goes from one side to the other. I've got an example from their game against Brentford. So Brentford are about to play the ball back towards their defence. We've got this Leeds back five and this front unit I was speaking about here. And the Leeds are relatively deep, but this is a good opportunity to push up the pitch. Brentford move the ball across their back line. It comes over to Aaron Hickey, and you can see the midfield three has shuttled across, looking to close off his options and apply pressure. The issue here, though, is for Brentford to push Leeds not only back to the edge of their penalty box, but close to the edge of their 6-yard box. All they need to do is switch the play back across the pitch, because this Leeds midfield three now has to shuttle all the way back across. The back five is very passive and flat. Collins could carry through into the space here. Instead, he plays it straight out to Ouattara, who, after taking on his fullback a couple of times, Leeds have retreated like near to the edge of their 6-yard box. And if Ouattara produces something better than a bit of a weak shot into the goalkeeper's hands, this could be 1-0 in the 25th minute. And this might just seem like a cherry-picked example, right? But I've got a very complicated chart, which is actually easy to explain thanks to my lovely diagram here. This is progressive passes conceded through the middle of the pitch. All it is just counting the number of times Leeds have conceded a pass that goes forward into this area of the pitch. Not an area you really want the ball to be going into, right? And across the season, it's been very up and down until the last 3 games where this 5-3-2 has been deployed, where it's been 8 times per game consistently. Right. Goes to show Leeds are consistently conceding territory and opponents are playing through them. So I think, sure, defensively things do look a bit better. Over the course of the season, it's going to get worse. That's just speaking on the defence. John has spoken about the attack and how it's improved. I think it's worth saying that Leeds are probably close to their ceiling in their attack. The direct approach they've been using with Calvert-Lewin up front, but you've also got Nemetra and Okafor. These are 3 very injury-prone players, so fitness issues rather, not necessarily injuries, but there's concerns there. One of these players could miss out. And while Leeds are on 1 point per game at the moment, which I believe is their internal target, which should be enough to stay in the Premier League, when you're playing against West Ham, who could be their main relegation rival, this probably isn't going to be a Premier League season where 32 or 33 points is enough to stay up. So I think even a slight drop-off from that 1 point per game model is enough to see Leeds go down. And I think there's a lot of hurdles that could see them stumble over.
Yeah, hurdles like going away to Anfield, going away to Everton, going away to Chelsea and Aston Villa as well. Oof, we'll see. Oh, let's not forget Old Trafford. Right, let's talk about West Ham. Theoretically, West Ham should kind of be okay. They've got Nuno Espirito Santo, the guy that kept Forest up, the guy that got Forest back into Europe after 30 years. They should be fine, right?
There's a couple of areas where I think Nuno has improved West Ham, mainly, I would say, in a sort of defensive structural sense. That I think West Ham have been quite open, particularly since Lopetegui, and the Lopetegui era still gives me nightmares in terms of the defensive structures in those games. The problem that he's having is that even within these structures where you're giving your players every opportunity of being able to stop the opponent from scoring, you still rely on individual moments. And those individual moments are going badly a little too often for me. So I've got 2 examples here from the Villa game. Actually, we're going to look at all 3 of the Villa goals because there's elements of mistakes that are made in all of them. In the first half, West Ham were using a really nice 4-4-2 diamond shape, which matched up really nicely to what Villa were trying to do. And they were able to keep them really quiet. In the whole game, they conceded 0.5 XG. But there's just a few little areas where we can look at where the players maybe fall down. So the ball is received out wide by John McGinn, and then we've got Mavropanos with Ollie Watkins, who puts him under pressure for the goal. And I want to talk a little bit about separation. Separation is just finding space. Yeah. If you've got players getting close, and the whole idea of a defensive structure is to get your players close to their opponents to make it hard for them to do things. So if your structure works, you should have good access to players. It's clear that they've got good access to players. The problem is that the individuals maybe get shifted a little bit too easy. So Diouf gets shifted by John McGinn far too easily, so McGinn is able to create enough space to get a good cross in. Ollie Watkins drops off Mavropanos to give himself the momentum to go past him and arrive in a good situation. And I think Mavropanos is a little bit slow responding to that. So we get to this situation where you can see, despite the fact Watkins dropped off, he's able to get a run on Mavropanos, gets ahead of him. So two sort of very small mistakes here, which you can, rightly as a West Ham fan, you could say, we're unlucky to get punished in this way. Mavropanos does a good job of getting back across Ollie Watkins, but to do that, he has to use a lot of physical prowess to do that. As a result, he loses a bit of control, and then the ball bounces off his head and goes in. Incredibly unlucky goal, but you can trace it to these little mistakes that are being made. Same with the third goal as well. And what I've done here is I've just highlighted the defensive movements that this midfield three have to do. We saw it with the Leeds game as well. When the ball goes one side, you have to shuffle across. So you've got Mateus Fernandes shuffling into this area. Freddie Potts is coming across. And then what should happen really is Magassa drops in to cover the space that is opened out by these two players shuttling across. He doesn't do it. Space is opened out for Morgan Rogers. And at the point where the pass is paid to Rogers, Magassa is too far away to actually catch him. Now, again, you could consider yourself fairly unlucky to concede a chance like this. Villa have been scoring a lot of chances like this, so it's the sort of thing you should be aware of going into this game. But even still, he still plonked it in from...
I mean, it's a freak goal, man. It's a special
It's
one.
an incredible goal, yeah. But again, it all comes down from the system that had been working the whole game with Magassa dropping in. He doesn't do that once and you get punished for it. That's the Premier League for you. Nuno can do all of the structural changes he wants. If the players aren't going to be sharp enough in those moments, that's going to be an issue. The other thing that I'm worried about with them is they are getting into winning game states. They're getting into scenarios where they're winning, which is absolutely brilliant for a team who are in a relegation battle. The issue is that they're struggling to stay in those winning game states. Is the issue here not necessarily just that they're not defending well enough, but they're not able to possess the ball well enough when they are in these winning game states? Because I think being able to defend with the ball is a really useful aspect as well. So I've got another viz here, which is just showing you sequences of play where you have 10 passes in a row. So this is in winning game states. When Man City are winning, on average, they're doing 10 plus passing sequences, right? So they're keeping the ball for long stretches. It allows you to control the game a little bit better. West Ham are absolutely rock bottom of this viz. I think it's very clear that there's situations where West Ham have the ball. If they protected it better, they wouldn't be putting themselves under so much pressure, particularly as we'll see in this example, because when they lose the ball, it actually means their defensive structure is compromised. And so all the hard work that they're doing at getting a good defensive structure doesn't count because they've lost the ball. So here's the play. Diouf has the ball. You expect them to work the ball down the line, place the ball to Paquetá, and then makes the run into the channel. And you think, look for that runner. This is all fine. Paquetá actually gets overrun by two Villa players, though. The ball is turned over, and now we're in a horrible situation because your two fullbacks, Wan-Bissaka on the other side, who is eventually the guy who's responsible for the goal scorer, Morgan Rogers, but also Diouf has made that run, so he's out of position. And from here, everything just sort of collapses. The ball is moved to Tielemans under very little pressure. Tielemans, we talked about separation. Look how much separation he's got here. So he's got all the time in the world to play the ball in. Wan-Bissaka is making a good effort to catch up with Morgan Rogers, but the problem is that Rogers can still comfortably receive the ball, and because he can stop the ball dead, the momentum of Wan-Bissaka carries him too far, and then he ends up with a pretty easy shot. This was the only good chance that Villa created in the whole game. But again, it's coming from these little mistakes here and there where I think despite the improvements that Nuno has obviously brought, it requires the players to be, one, making sure that they're not losing concentration in certain key moments, but two, working on that in possession side of the game as well. So for me, this is why I still think that West Ham, given their 3 points behind and goal difference behind Leeds, are probably in the slightly weaker position.
Okay, John mentions little mistakes, but still half a season left to go. They've got players like Jared Bowen. You've got players there with Premier League experience. Surely that should be enough.
You'd think, right, but I do think West Ham have echoes of the Leicester team from a couple of seasons ago. Remember when everyone said they're too good to go down? Yeah. Look at all the great players they've got, and lo and behold, they actually got relegated. That said, that is actually the argument I am going to make, that they are too good to go down and their players are far too good to go down here. You mentioned Jared Bowen. He's a player capable of winning games on his own. I think that goes without saying. But the players I want to focus on, John actually spoke about before, is the midfield in Mateus Fernandes, Sungutu Magassa, and also Freddie Potts. I mean, it would be easy to compare him to Declan Rice. Potts is a lot older than when Rice broke through, but he's come into the team and he's helping break up play in midfield alongside Magassa, but maybe in a bit of a different way. His focus is a lot more on, I think, reading of the game. And what I've liked about Potts so far is when he drops into the back line and helps clearing the ball from the box, which is exactly what you want from a team that is really struggling to do that at the moment. So I think As well, like speaking about like this group of players, like Potts being 22, Magassa being quite young as well. I think there's a big ceiling for West Ham. Nuno is still quite young in his tenure. He didn't get to bring many backroom staff with him. I think it's hard to imagine West Ham not getting a lot better over the course of the season. In fact, since Potts came into the team, he made his first start against Newcastle. They've picked up 9 points in 7 games, which is, I think, 4 more than Leeds, and will put them about mid-table if you count the Premier League from that game onwards. So I think West Ham are going to pick up a lot of points and climb away from the relegation zone, and that will see them go over Leeds.
Okay, I'm just going to give you one more opportunity. At least staying up?
Yes.
West Ham definitely staying up?
Yes.
Okay, who do you think is going to be staying up this season? Let us know in the comments.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football